Live streaming now? Yeah. A revolutionary salute to all watching. This is the truth about Venezuela, alternatively called Where is Venezuela Headed? Now Venezuela, as we all know, has been in the news for years and years, paraded by right-wingers as an example of the failure of socialism. But we are going to see the truth about this. We are going to see whether Venezuela is really socialist. We are going to get down to the bottom of what is really happening in that country. Now just an aside, it was Pinochet's birthday the other day, so burn in hell, Pinochet. Now you can see all these news articles from the most rabid right-wing press, all heaping their excrement on Venezuela, of their execrable condemnation, etc. Congratulations to Bolivarian socialism from Forbes. There's this one journalist of Forbes who feels the need to troll Venezuela every time something happens, and so he has this format. Congratulations to Bolivarian socialism. Every time something happens, like the Bolivar note lives on, or humanitarian crisis, chaos in Venezuela. And of course, the Telegraph, using Venezuela as a tool to berate Corbyn with, demanding that he somehow take responsibility for the actions of the government. But we will see that Venezuela has a very troubled history, which has led up to this point. It's not all the fault of Chavez or one particular political party. This is something that was many years in the making, and we will see this as we go along. Venezuela gained independence in 1810 under Simon Bolivar. Now, like many Latin American countries, it was ruled by an oligarchy. There was a powerful agrarian elite, mostly white, descended from the Spanish conquerors, and they lorded it over the rest of the population, who were mostly black and mixed race, and who didn't really have any rights, economic or political, at all. For much of the 19th century, in fact, it was ruled by military dictators, known as caudillos. These were powerful landowners like Juan Vicente Gómez, that could afford their own private armies, and basically treated the country like it was their private property. So they have no regard for the constitution or for law and order or anything like that. They'll just march in every few years, seize power, rule as president for a few years, plunder the country, and then retire to their estates or die in office, if they were particularly power hungry and didn't want to give up power at all. Now, in 1922, oil was discovered, and this was when the destiny of Venezuela started to change. Gómez, who was in power at the time, was a puppet of foreign imperialist powers. He'd actually overthrown his friend, Cipriano Castro, who stood up to the imperialist powers during Venezuela's debt crisis during the early 20th century. And he allowed the foreign imperialists to come into the country and basically plunder it of its oil wealth. This oil wealth, world's largest proven oil reserves in fact, could have been used to benefit the people. But instead we see a classic example of the oil money being used to line the pockets of the elite in the country. Now, to be fair, there was some improvement thanks to the oil wealth for the common people. Some small changes here and there, like modern infrastructure, roads for example, which did benefit the population in allowing people to communicate more freely, but it was at the cost of massive repression and tyranny. Venezuela's economy actually has been massively dependent on oil ever since, and this has been a big problem for the country, and that it just can't wean itself off of oil. And so, whenever oil prices go down, the entire economy goes down. Now we will see this pattern repeated throughout Venezuelan history, and we will see this as a crisis which affects all governments, left or right, not just socialist governments or just conservative governments, but every single Venezuelan government which comes to power must deal with this. And now Venezuela was transformed from being a relatively poor agrarian country to a more wealthy, urbanized one, but with extreme inequalities of wealth, as we shall see. And Dutch disease, a phenomenon which is given to countries that have a lot of oil wealth, which sucks a lot out of the rest of the economy, has been afflicted with this ever since. Now, when at the time oil was discovered, the masses of Venezuela were in absolute misery. Life expectancy, 34 years. Preventable diseases like malaria, Chagas disease, yellow fever, cholera, tuberculosis, pneumonia, dysentery. And it was only really when the state used the oil wealth to actually make improvements in terms of healthcare that finally we actually saw life expectancy go up, and we saw things improve somewhat for the population. But when at the time oil was discovered, Venezuela was a very, very poor country. Most of the people were in complete and utter misery. Now, Venezuela had a short democratic period from 1945 to 48. The dictator, Gómez, he died in 1935 after many years of plundering the country and tyrannizing it. And there was a bourgeois democracy instituted for the first time in 1945. It lasted about 3 years, before being overthrown by another military coup. So, not much success there. This just proves that in countries like Venezuela, which are relatively backward in the capitalist world, the bourgeoisie really does not have much of a progressive wing. In that even if it does have a progressive wing, that wing is very weak and not really able to assert itself in a very solid manner. So, after a couple of months of having its first democratically elected president, Romulo Gallegos, he was overthrown and there was another dictatorship under Marcos Pérez Jiménez, which lasted for approximately 10 years. Now, to be fair to Pérez, he did use the oil wealth to make some improvements for the population, but it wasn't really because he cared about masses. It was because he wanted to stop communism and the threat of communism, which was rapidly spreading throughout the Venezuelan masses, and increasing amounts of Venezuelans were coming to accept communist ideas. This is a massive threat to the order in Venezuela, which had an elite controlling all of the resources in the entire economy. And Pérez knew this. That's why he used the oil wealth to put in place some social reforms which would try and dampen down the militancy among working classes and among the proletariat, which is growing rapidly around this time. Now, because of the oil wealth, agriculture in Venezuela collapsed. All the farm workers, all the agrarian capitalists, they all left the farms, they all left the rural areas, the countryside, and they all went to the cities. And they all crowded into the cities because that was where the money could be made. And as a result, by the 1990s, the population, the rural population, had declined to a mere 12%. And the collapse of agriculture had devastating effects on Venezuela. And you can see this in the fact that ever since that time, Venezuela has been massively dependent on imports of food from abroad, which is why it's suffering so much at the moment, because it can barely afford to import food from abroad. So decrepit is its agriculture, that it can't produce its own food anymore. It's not been food dependent ever since. And so you can see this, the roots of this massive crisis, in the fact that in the 20th century, agriculture basically collapsed because the capitalists found it more profitable to invest in oil than to invest in actually improving farms and to improving food production. Pérez was what we Marxists would call a Bonapartist, in that he tried to balance the classes between each other, but he didn't actually want either of them to have ultimate power. And so you can see around this time the state was relatively independent of both classes, although ultimately still a capitalist state, a bourgeois state, which was designed to prop up capitalism and capital. Now there was massive economic growth, of course, but not necessarily growth that benefited the masses, as you will see over time. There was a second democratic period from 1958 to 1999, and notice how I've put democratic in apostrophes, quotation marks. That is because this wasn't really a democracy in the real sense of the word. It was a bourgeois democracy, a liberal democracy. A democracy created by the bourgeoisie for the bourgeoisie, not for the masses. Now, Pérez was overthrown in 1958, and there was another democratic period in Venezuela's history. There were two leading parties at the time, the centre-right COPE and the centre-left AD party, and they made an agreement known as the Punto Fijo. And according to this agreement, both of them would alternate in power after every few years, so that they would both preserve the stability of Venezuela's democracy, and they would prevent the communists from achieving power. Romulo Betancourt, who was actually an ex-Marxist, became president for the second time in Venezuela's history. Despite being an ex-Marxist, he was only too happy to repress the Communist Party with brutal measures, crushing a Cuban-inspired armed insurgency in the country, and actually banning the Communist Party for a time period. Now, Betancourt and his Acción Democrática party, who were the centre-left party at this time, they became the dominant party in this period. And there were a lot of policies implemented which reformed capitalism and did give some benefits to the masses, but ultimately it was a Bonapartist approach designed to maintain the stability of Venezuela's nice, bourgeois, liberal democracy, not actually to give the masses a say in the running of the country. We now come to Carlos Andrés Pérez, a very colourful figure in Venezuelan history. Now, at the time he came to power, Venezuela was going through an oil boom because there was a massive boom in oil prices. And so, because Venezuela had so much oil, it was able to afford to do a lot of things that it may not have been able to afford some years ago. Under Pérez, Andrés Pérez, the PDVSA was nationalized, the oil company in Venezuela. And the Venezuelan state, for the first time, had direct control over the oil resources of the country, which had before then been owned by a small group of foreign capitalists. And he could afford to do this because oil prices were so high. and because Venezuela could do this without seriously damaging its economy. Now, he used the oil wealth to fund the lavish welfare state, which gave him lots of popularity, actually, among the masses of Venezuela. And he also helped that he was very flamboyant character, had a lot of mistresses, etc., did a lot of lavish building projects, etc., etc., had very interesting hair, as you can see, as well. And Venezuela actually became known as Saudi Venezuela because of all its oil wealth and its lavish projects, which Perez lavishly funded, and he could afford to fund because Venezuela had so much money. Now, this welfare state was only sustainable as long as the oil money kept pouring in. The moment this oil money disappeared, there would be no more welfare state. And people could see this. People could see that there would be a crisis of Venezuelan capitalism when the oil prices went down. They saw what was going to happen, but they didn't really prepare for it. Now, Venezuela did become the richest country in South America, but there was massive poverty and inequality, as we shall see. And leftist singers like Ali Primer, who we were listening to earlier, actually made songs pointing out the plight of the poor, who were still being neglected in Venezuela. And they didn't really benefit from this whole boom, as we shall see. Now, we had a second term in 1989, and during this period, the oil boom, as was prophesied, collapsed. The price of oil plummeted. Venezuelan capitalism was now thrown into a crisis from which it could not escape without massive attacks on the Venezuelan working class. Now, Perez was re-elected in 1988 after a populist anti-neoliberal campaign in which he had actually promised not to allow the IMF to impose its structural reforms on Venezuela, and he had promised to protect the gains made during his first presidency in terms of welfare, in terms of education and healthcare, etc. But no sooner was he elected into office than he betrayed his voters and began attacking the very people he was elected to help. Once in power, he abandoned his old leftist ways and he implemented hard-right IMF measures like deregulation, privatization, welfare spending, etc., all at the bidding of the Washington consensus and America. Poverty levels rose to 65%, and there were riots in Caracas, actually, because of this ridiculous rise in prices which resulted because of all this turmoil and these attacks on the working classes. And in response to this, what did Perez do? He got the agents of the Venezuelan bourgeois state to shoot thousands of innocent protesters in the streets of Caracas from February to March 1989. Now, you talk about how brutal and authoritarian Chavez and Maduro are, but I have never read of them shooting thousands of innocent protesters in the streets in cold blood, in broad daylight, ever. But the mainstream media will not tell you about this. They will only tell you about how horrible Venezuela's current government is. They will not remind you of the dark past of Venezuela and the acts of people like Perez in killing thousands of innocent people. Now we come to the man of the moment, the man of the hour, Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías, the founder of the Bolivarian Revolution, former Venezuelan president who died in 2013, and who put an end to this whole system of two-party rule, of corrupt, decadent, bourgeois authoritarianism and repression of masses. Now, he was born in 1954 in Barinas. He was actually a mixed race, like most Venezuelans at the time. And so he was actually able to identify with the struggles of the poor people in Venezuela, of the masses of Venezuela, because he was one of them, because he was born into a family of that background. And he grew up strongly identifying with the downtrodden in Venezuela, such that when he grew older, he decided that he would spend the rest of his life fighting for them and fighting to change things in Venezuela to improve their lives, instead of repressing them as they had been under the bourgeois democracy of the Punto Fijo under Betancourt and the other presidents. Now, Chavez grew up admiring revolutionaries, especially from Venezuelan history, like Simón Bolívar and Ezequiel Zamora, but also from Latin America in general, like Che Guevara. Now, age 17, he joined the army. He was a voracious reader, like myself. He devoured the works of Bolivar, Marx, Velasco, Peruvian left-wing dictator, and Lenin and Mao. At one point, he actually dreamed of becoming a baseball player. He didn't want to be a politician, he wanted to play baseball. But he found himself becoming drawn to politics because he saw the plight of the poor people in his country. In 1977, Chavez formed the Venezuelan People's Liberation Army, or Ejército de Liberación del Pueblo de Venezuela, or ELPV, with a group of army officers. Now, they wanted to eventually transform Venezuela into a socialist state, and they started working from very early on to convert people to the cause of socialism. That very year, he was actually sent to a state in Venezuela, Anzoátegui, to fight a Marxist-Leninist insurgency group. Chavez actually came to sympathize with their aims, and he began to question whether or not he was actually doing the right thing in being on the side of these army officers, this whole apparatus of the bourgeois state repressing the common people. He began to have second thoughts, and he wasn't sure that he was doing the right thing actually, in going there and fighting these people whom he sympathized with, whom he thought were doing the right thing for the common people of Venezuela. In fact, in 1982, he decided to form a new group called the MBR 200. This was meant to replace the older group that he had formed, and they went about plotting a coup in Venezuela. They were planning to overthrow the government and install a left-wing government which would actually serve the people. They spent many years planning this, and the next several years they spent doing this very secretive work, secretive revolutionary work, of plotting to one day take over the country and expel this corrupt, repressive system of the punto fijo and two-party rule. Now, Chavez's disgust at what he called the genocide of Caracas by Perez caused him to intensify his plans and became even more determined to rid Venezuela of this corrupt tyranny, this corrupt oligarchy, which had been dragging this country into the ground ever since the 1950s, ever since its existence, rather, I should say. On 4th of February 1992, Chavez launched a coup of a group of army officers after many years of planning. But this failed, and there was a second attempt by officers who were loyal to his movement, but that failed as well. Chavez unfortunately had to hand himself in to the authorities, but they made a crucial mistake. They allowed Chavez to make a statement live on television, getting his fellow officers to try and lay down their arms and give up the coup attempt. And he used this to transform the aspirations, the hopes of the people of Venezuela. And he addressed them directly. He told them that he had only failed por ahora, for now, but that he would keep fighting for a new Venezuela, a Venezuela that would be for the common people and not for the old elite, the old oligarchy who had been repressing and brutalizing the masses ever since their rule, ever since the independence of the country. Now, in 1994, he was released by the new president, Rafael Caldera, because the old president, Perez, had actually been thrown out of office for corruption. And in 1993, he came to power, this new president, and he made the crucial mistake of releasing this man, releasing Chavez, the man who was on the side of the common people, who had tried to overthrow a brutal, repressive, elitist government. And he gave Chavez the opportunity to build up a left-wing revolutionary movement among the masses of Venezuela, among the workers of Venezuela, peasants of Venezuela, to finally destroy the system once and for all. Aló, presidente. Now, a few years after he was released from prison, Chavez was elected president of Venezuela with 56.2% of the vote. Initially, his main opponent was a former Venezuelan beauty queen, and the bourgeois parties thought that she would actually try and steal some of Chavez's funding and prevent him from becoming president. But sadly, they failed. And they had to switch their support to another person, an American-educated economist, Romer. They lost anyway, and Chavez became president, but for the first time, a genuine working-class man became president of Venezuela. Mixed-race man as well. So, very much from the masses, from the people, from the common people of Venezuela. Not one of the old oligarchs, the rich white middle classes who have been ruling the country ever since the days of the punto fijo. Now, Chavez, when he first came to power, was not that radical. In fact, he saw himself as being in the mold of people like Bill Clinton and Tony Blair. He tried to assure people that he was not a Marxist, not a communist. He was a nice, moderate, social democrat, left-wing reformist. Wouldn't do anything too radical. Wouldn't try to disturb capitalism too much. He just wanted to reform it and make it more inclusive for the people of Venezuela. Now, in 1999, there was a new constitution created in which social reforms were integrated. So things like the right to healthcare, the right to education, they were put into the constitution for the first time. And he actually ran for re-election under this constitution in 2000. And there were social programs called the Bolivarian missions, which were set up, which involved welfare spending on things like healthcare, education, housing, and food. Initially, he insisted upon friendly relations with the West. He actually visited Blair in 2001. This is just before the war on terror. And he even initially followed advice from the IMF, that bastion of neoliberalism, which had done so much to destroy Venezuela during the 1990s with their structural adjustment programs. And yet he took advice from them, initially. He also set up a weekly television show called Aló, Presidente, with which to spread his revolutionary message to the masses of Venezuela. And he would talk about various topics. He would quote Marx, Lenin, Engels, Mao, Galbraith, all sorts of people. He would talk about what books he was reading, etc. talking to the average common Venezuelan about such lofty intellectual topics. Very interesting, very amazing man. Just to give you an idea of the variety of topics he talked about, he once spent 5 minutes talking about his diarrhea live on television, which gives you an idea of just how much he liked to talk, even about perhaps not very appropriate things. Now, even with his moderate reforms, the Venezuelan bourgeoisie was still not happy. They still saw Chavez as a dangerous radical. They even called him El Peón, basically a slave. They didn't have any regard for him at all, any respect for him. They saw him as one of the masses, one of the hoi polloi, one of the mob. He had no manners, he had no dignity, he couldn't be president, he didn't act like president. He was seen as Trump-like in many respects, actually. He wasn't seen as a dignified person who was worthy to occupy the office of president of Venezuela. He was just seen as rather rabble. And so they were insulted at the idea that a man who should have been one of their domestic servants was president of the country. They began sabotage from day one. Now, many of the progressive middle classes who had once supported him backed away once they realized that perhaps they couldn't control Chavez as much as they thought they would be able to. Now, in April 2002, mass protests erupted over his plans to try and assert political control over the oil company, which was then basically owned by a bunch of petty bourgeois careerists, not really interested in helping masses as such, just the money in their own pockets. Now, they managed to collaborate with the bourgeoisie in Venezuela, and on the 9th of April 2002, the National Federation of Trade Unions, the CTV, just again led by petty bourgeois careerists, who had actually had links to the AD party, the former ruling party at the time, they called for a general strike. 2 days later, there were a million citizens on the streets of Caracas demonstrating against the government. Not necessarily lower class people, or the masses, but middle class people who felt that Chavez was a threat to their living standards, a threat to their power, their stranglehold over Venezuelan politics, because he was going to break up this nice, comfortable punto fijo system, this nice, comfortable system of bourgeois democracy, which they had grown so accustomed to over the years. Now, there were pro-government demonstrators clashing with opposition protesters outside Miraflores Palace, which was the presidential palace at the time, where Chavez was staying. In fact, the gunshots rang out, and these gunshots were blamed on Chavez and his supporters. In fact, the privately owned right-wing anti-government media in Venezuela showed doctors' images purporting to show Chavistas shooting at innocent protesters, when in fact they were returning a fire from people shooting at them. In fact, by the end of the day, 19 people, including the protesters, were dead because of these clashes outside Miraflores. And so, what did the bourgeoisie do? Well, they took this opportunity to blame Chavez and hold him solely responsible for the deaths that had occurred. And a bunch of army officers turned up on TV, live on television, blaming Chavez for these deaths and demanding that he resign. And when he refused to do so, what did they do? Well, they just stormed the presidential palace, abducted him in the middle of the night, and took him to some island prison for 48 hours. He almost ended up another Salvador Allende, and things could have gone very wrong for the Bolivarian Revolution at this point. The Venezuelan businessman, Pedro Carmona, who was head of Venezuela's main business union actually, he was made interim president. Couldn't get a better representative of Venezuelan capitalism if you tried. And the National Assembly and Supreme Court were dissolved, and the 1999 Constitution, which was the new constitution which Chavez had created and which he had run for re-election under, was declared void. Undemocratic, completely undemocratic, just a military coup from the top down. Word spread throughout the country that Chavez had not resigned, and the fact the military were lying. And the poor people of the Venezuelan slums, known as the barrios, they turned up onto the streets, demanding Chavez's return, and demanding the end to the coup. Now, soldiers loyal to the president actually retook the presidential palace from the bourgeois troops who were on the side of the coup, and they rescued Chavez from his island prison and brought him back to the capital in triumph. Within 48 hours, the coup had collapsed, Carmona had gone into exile, and Chavez was back in office. The proletariat of Venezuela, the masses of Venezuela, they had saved the Bolivarian Revolution. And this is the first time when the masses of Venezuela, for the first time, taking their destiny into their own hands, bursting upon the political stage to transform events in their own way, instead of relying on the people from the elite, from the bourgeoisie to control all the events, to have all the initiative. They, for the first time, did something. They were proactive. They took charge of the situation, and they defeated the coup. And without them, Chavez would not be back in office. If he ended up back in office, he would most likely have ended up dead, like Allende, or in exile. and the Bolivarian Revolution would have collapsed. Venezuela would be just like, say, Mexico now, or Colombia, still ruled by a corrupt bourgeois elite with no interest in the people. Now, like Allende in Chile, Chavez faced a strike of capital. They did not give up in their attempts to overthrow him. They tried yet again to try and kick out Chavez from office. In 2002-3, the Venezuelan Business Union, FEDECAMAS, and the CTV, they called for an oil lockout. Now, Venezuela, of course, being very dependent on oil, suffered very much because of this. In fact, people couldn't actually buy their Christmas presents because of this strike, because all the businesses had shut down and none of the vehicles that were needed to supply things throughout the country could move, etc. But this failed. By New Year, the strike was clearly collapsing, and the capitalists were realizing that this whole strike, this attempt to overthrow Chavez, was hurting them more than it was hurting Chavez. And so they just gave up. The strike failed, and threatened by bankruptcy, businesses began reopening. By April 2003, oil production had reached pre-strike levels. Now, the opposition were not ready to drop yet. They had one last trick up their sleeve, that they were going to try to recall Chavez from the presidency. And they were able to get a certain amount of signatures, which allowed them to force a referendum on whether or not Chavez should have to face re-election. They failed. 59% of voters voted not to recall Chavez. The counter-revolutionaries failed again. And the slogan they used was, Chavez no se va, the slogan of his supporters. All these attempts by the bourgeoisie in Venezuela to overthrow Chavez over many years radicalized him in a very great way. He realized that there was no compromising with these people. They would do everything in their power to destroy his revolution. And so he became even more radical. He appeared to be leaving behind his initial Bonapartism, his initial reformism, and began siding more decisively with the working classes. In fact, he began freely quoting Marx, Lenin, Mao, and Trotsky on his weekly television show. He condemned the USA and the UK during the War on Terror. In fact, he called Bush Mr. Danger after a character in a Venezuelan novel, and a donkey on his weekly TV show. He even called him the devil on the UN. You can see all this on YouTube, actually. It's a nice 3-minute clip of him just insulting Bush, calling him, "You are a donkey, you are a drunk, you are an alcoholic, you are a psychologically ill man, Mr. Danger." And he even attacked Blair, his former friend, Tony Blair. "You are an imperialist pawn who attempts to curry favor with Danger Bush Hitler, the #1 mass murderer and assassin there is on this planet. Go straight to hell, Mr. Blair." No longer friends with Blair, as you can see. He strengthened his grip on the military and the media. Now, the middle class came to hate Chavez more and more, particularly because, as I mentioned before, his mixed race background, and of course the middle classes in Venezuela being mostly white. And you can actually see this in the documentaries, like the Revolution will be televised, of these middle class white Venezuelans attacking Chavez, attacking his racial background, etc. And they actually called him Ese Mono, that monkey, and Mi Comandante, which is a play upon the title that his supporters gave him, Mi Comandante, or commander. Undemocratic? People often say that Chavez, well, he's a despot, he's an authoritarian populist, he's caudillo, doesn't care about democracy, and just destroys everything in his path, just crushes all opposition. And yet, what do we see? We see that Chavez and his regime were more democratic than any other Venezuelan regime that came before him. He won more electoral contests than any other leader in the world. The 1998 presidential election, 2000 presidential election, 2000 recall attempt, 2005 parliamentary elections, 2006 presidential election, 2009 constitutional referendum, 2010 parliamentary elections, 2012 regional elections, 2012 presidential election. I'm running out of breath here. He even accepted defeat in 2007 over proposals to reform the constitution. Now, what is true is this: it wasn't democratic enough. It was still dominated by a bureaucracy. It was still, in many respects, Bonapartist. Now, Chavez was just one man. Even if he came to accept radical conclusions and became a Marxist towards the end, it wasn't enough to transform Venezuela, to transform the Venezuelan socialists, because there were still people in his own party opposing him, trying to stop him from being too radical, trying to put pressure on him to be more moderate, to reconcile with bourgeoisie. And so he did not have absolute power here. His hands were tied, and he also had many friends and many allies who were pressing upon him, putting pressure on him to not be too radical, not be too destructive. So even if he wanted to carry out certain radical reforms, he found himself unable to do so because of the structures in which he was operating. Because he was operating within the framework of capitalism, of a bourgeois state, of a bourgeois reformist left-wing party. Now, social indicators under Chavez, as you can see, massively improved throughout his presidency, thanks mainly to high oil prices. That was the only reason that Chavez could afford these lavish reforms. You can see that infant mortality fell. 31,000 Cuban doctors came to the country to train Venezuelan doctors in terms of healthcare, etc., paid for with oil money. So it was quite clear that the moment the oil money disappeared, all these Cuban doctors would disappear as well, which they have, in fact. And we can see in Venezuela that its healthcare has now completely collapsed because of this. But at the time, there was massive improvement, as long as the oil money kept flowing, as we have seen before in previous eras of Venezuela's history. Social spending doubled, the number of Venezuelans receiving pensions increased, the Gini coefficient, which measured income inequality, that fell to the lowest Gini coefficient in the region, so the lowest income inequality in the region. Spending on education increased. The Gran Misión Vivienda, which he launched in 2011, has seen 1.5 million homes built, far in excess of targets. All this good stuff, but dependent upon capitalism, dependent upon Venezuelan capitalism to keep on booming, keep on growing because of high oil prices. The moment the oil prices went down, all of this would go down the drain. Economic indicators, they also improved, but again, high oil prices, not because of anything Chavez in particular did, but because oil was doing very well at the time. Ironically, the fastest growth was in the private sector, even though the government was supposed to be socialist. Just goes to show how this works. Venezuela was not socialist, it was capitalist under Chavez. It still is capitalist. 70% of the economy is still privately owned. In fact, in 2010, Fox News was saying that Venezuela is not socialist. Now they're saying, Venezuela, an example of the failure of socialism, now that everything is going wrong. But back then they weren't saying that. They were pointing out that Venezuela wasn't really socialist at all. In fact, it was still pretty much capitalist. Inflation was a persistent problem during Chavez's presidency, even with all of the economic indicators which improved under him, such as poverty, etc. There were still problems with inflation because of his penchant for money printing. Whenever he couldn't afford something, he would just print more money. As you can see, this had devastating consequences for Venezuela's economy, to the extent that Venezuelans find it very hard to buy basic necessities. Again, we come to these economic indicators. Now, in 2003, Chavez actually founded an organization called Caribe, now called Senusex, which was created by the government to actually control foreign exchange rates, so as to curb capital flight, so as to stop capitalists from just converting all their money into dollars and running away, and leaving the country with nothing. Now, this actually had the opposite effect. This caused a black market for foreign currency, because Venezuelans were so dependent on imports, or it has been dependent on imports ever since oil was discovered. The country currency was not seen as reliable, and so, especially since the printing of money just devalued it further. Price controls have led to shortages, because under capitalism, which is of course about profit, capitalists will only produce when there is a chance of profit. If there is no chance of profit, they will not produce. And we can see this. The governments believe that if they just tweak things here and there, put a few reforms, put a few price controls, then everything will be fine, and the people will be able to keep on affording these necessities, and the capitalists will be able to profit in terms of huge sums of money as they always have been. But no, the profit motive drives capitalism. It always has driven capitalism. These reforms can't work. They just cause a strike of capital. Now, earlier in his presidency, a scandal broke out when it was discovered that certain companies who had ties to the government had been cheating the authorities. They were using foreign currency given to them by the government at very favourable exchange rates, and they were actually meant to buy imports and sell them at prices subsidised by the government, so that the people could afford them. But they weren't importing these goods. They were taking the money, they were buying the goods, and they were selling them abroad for higher prices, and pocketing the money, and using the money to buy even more currency, and repeating the cycle over and over again. This is continuing, even under Maduro. They just can't get a lid on this problem. And this is because of the folly of believing that the reforms here and there, in terms of price controls, and in terms of currency controls, that they can solve the problem. They can't solve the problem. What needs to happen is that the Venezuelan workers and peasants need to take control of the economy directly, instead of just leaving it in the hands of the capitalists and trying to reform things. Now, goods are more widely available on the black market because of these price controls, because the capitalists just won't sell under the prices that are approved of by the government, because they can't make a profit. they would rather sell on the black market because that allows them to make a profit. Price controls have led to even higher prices, as we have seen in Venezuela, which now has the highest inflation rate in the world. Prophecy. As Trotsky said in The Revolution Betrayed, very wise words, the basis of bureaucratic rule is the poverty of society in objects of consumption, both the resulting struggle of each against all. When there are enough goods in a store, the purchasers can come and go whenever they want to. But when there aren't so many goods, then they have to stand in line. When the lines are very long, then you need a policeman to keep order. Such is the starting point of the power of the Soviet bureaucracy, or in our case, the Venezuelan bureaucracy. This is what happens when you have scarcity of resources. There is always bureaucracy. It doesn't matter whether you call it socialism or not, it isn't socialism, it's bureaucracy. That is the problem here. And bureaucracy caused by scarcity of resources. You can't build socialism in one country. You cannot build socialism when you have a scarcity of resources. Socialism requires more than enough resources. It requires a very advanced economic base. And Venezuela is not very advanced economically. It's still a poor country relative to others. It's underdeveloped in many ways. And Trotsky's theory of uneven and combined development actually applies very well to Venezuela and to other underdeveloped capitalist countries. Is that within the boundaries of capitalism, they just can't really develop that much because ultimately they are tied to the system, and the system relies on them being kept poor. And so what Chavez thought is that he could try and ally with the progressive bourgeoisie, which don't really exist, it turns out, because they aren't really progressive at all. They were just hoping to piggyback Chavez's popularity, and now they've seen that he is too radical for them, and now they are becoming reactionaries, they're becoming counter-revolutionaries, and Chavez has only just started to realize that towards his death, that he had made a crucial mistake, thinking that he could partner with these people and try and reform Venezuelan capitalism. But it turns out that he couldn't do this after all. They were always his class enemies. They were always going to betray the revolution. Venezuela has turned into a bureaucratic monstrosity because of this misguided attempt to try and reform capitalism. Despite his good intentions, Chavez never actually put in place direct democratic measures into the economy. Instead, it was all revolving around this bureaucracy, which he thought could try and make capitalism in Venezuela better for the masses, but which clearly cannot. Expropriacy. If we define socialism or communism as a situation in which the working class own the means of production and have put in place a rational, democratic plan of production, well, this is not happening in Venezuela. What we see in Venezuela is bureaucracy. That is the exact opposite of an economy run democratically by the workers. Other mistakes of Chavez. He thought that he could build socialism with a bourgeois state, and later he did realize that he had made a crucial mistake. And he did read Lenin, he did read State and Revolution, he did actually comment upon the mistakes that he had made, and he did say that he now realizes that he could not possibly build socialism in Venezuela allied to the bourgeoisie. But as I said before, he was just one man. He couldn't build socialism by himself, he couldn't convert the rest of the population to Marxist conclusions. I mean, different sections of the working class, as we see, come to revolutionary conclusions at different speeds. Chavez was one of the more class-conscious among them. But he could not drag everyone with him. And so we said that although Chavez himself became a radical, he could not get the people around him to also adopt radicalism, because they were more interested in keeping the status quo as it is. He thought that he could get the progressive bourgeoisie to help partake in their own destruction, but this doesn't work that way. They are a class with their own class interests, antagonistic to the working class. You can't ally with them to build socialism. They must be destroyed. He also presided over the creation of a Boliburguesia, made up of wealthy bureaucrats and businessmen who have become prosperous through the corrupt use of government power. And this is why he found it so hard to build socialism. That many of the people who claimed to be his friends and allies, helping him to build socialism, were actually going behind his back and exploiting the people. And he found himself in a situation which he no longer had full control over, because now the initiative had passed from him to these bureaucrats. And he found his power very limited in that regard, in an attempt to try and curb their influence and power. And that's why he ended up dying, a very frustrated man, a very disappointed man, having failed to actually build full socialism in Venezuela, and very worried for the country's future. He failed to make Venezuela less dependent on oil, as we have seen. There is evidence that this was actually being achieved somewhat before the financial crisis, but it appears that after the financial crisis, Venezuela went back to its old ways of being massively dependent on oil, because I suppose they figured it was the easiest way to try and weather the economic storms. He also failed to deal with Venezuela's outrageous murder rate. He failed to tackle inflation, worsened it. He failed to fix agriculture. 70% of the agricultural land is still owned by just 3% of the agricultural proprietors, which is just a holdover from Venezuela's old days of colonialism under Spain, and when a few wealthy people of Spanish descent, of Creole elites, owned all the agriculture, owned all the land, owned all the food that was being produced. And this is a situation which could easily be remedied if it was taken into the democratic hands of the working class. And then we would see a situation where Venezuela no longer has to import food from abroad, but can produce its own food. But because the capitalists don't find it profitable to produce food, they just refuse to. They just sit on their hands, they refuse to invest, they refuse to actually build agriculture up. And so we see that agriculture in Venezuela is still in a very parlous state, perilous state. And Chavez, despite his good intentions, has not managed to actually fix this problem. Chavez dies, as we see, in 2013 of cancer. And Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver and vice president under Chavez, becomes the new president. He still is the president today. Not a very good one, though, as you shall see. Venezuela has always been dependent on oil. It has always been dependent on the oil capitalists to keep on giving to the state. And they took this money whenever times were going well, and they used this money to build things like a welfare state, to implement social reforms, healthcare, education, etc., housing. But whenever oil prices have collapsed, as we saw before in Venezuela's history, not the first time before, under Perez, the reforms of the past are always reversed, always reversed, because capitalism can't afford these reforms anymore. To maintain the purchasing power of the working class, price controls and money printing has been accelerated under Maduro. As we have seen, these just make things worse. Price controls don't improve the situation, they just encourage hoarding and speculation, and the strike of capital. Money printing causes inflation and renders the currency unreliable. It just makes people purchase foreign currency instead, and this just makes the value of the currency reduce further, causing even more inflation, causing even more people to change currency, and this just goes on in a cycle. And we can actually see that Bolivar Fuerte, the Venezuelan currency, is now worth less than World of Warcraft gold. That is how astonishing the inflation is in that country. World of Warcraft gold is now worth more than Venezuela's currency. That is how worthless it is now. It's basically toilet paper. Money actually has an objective quality, as we will all know if you have been reading our Marx. It's not just something we choose to use. It's meant to express the quantity of socially necessary labor time, which is embodied in any commodity. And now it is this which allows goods to be exchanged under capitalism. When currency is manipulated in the fashion that it has been under Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela, and also under Stalin in the Soviet Union, well, people will just try and find alternative currencies instead. This doesn't solve the problem. You can't just print your way out of capitalism. You must approach it in a scientific manner. Trotsky himself criticized Stalin's inflationary policies in the Revolution Betrayed, which I've read. Currency manipulation is not compatible in any way, shape or form with socialist transformation, in which the extraction of consumer goods would require currency at first, would not require currency, but first labor vouchers, a more direct way than money of actually representing the amount of socially necessary labor time that one has performed and being able to access goods. And then after that, we'll get to a point where we have a surplus of goods, and we don't need these things like labor vouchers at all. But what we don't do is adulterate the currency. We don't cause inflation, which just destroys the value of the currency. It means people can't actually tell what the real value in the economy is anymore, because it doesn't actually correspond to anything real that's happening. It's just the bureaucracy creating these random figures and trying to propagate a fictitious exchange rate of currency, which just doesn't apply. Maduro's betrayals. Maduro has systematically sided with the right wing of his party over the more radical wing, of sacking ministers and replacing them with people who will be more amenable to the interests of capital. In fact, during a recent meeting of investors in Caracas, Maduro sought to bribe them with chocolates, thinking that this would make them try and be more lenient in their negotiations, which of course it will not. But there goes the delusion of the Bonapartists. Maduro still hopes that he can try and conciliate foreign capital and secure their confidence in the Venezuelan economy, whilst also preserving the gains of the Bolivarian revolution. This is Bonapartism of the highest order. Maduro has continued paying Venezuela's debt to foreign capitalist nations. He is further depleting the currency reserves that the country is using needs to import much needed food items. Now in August 2017, Maduro invited the class enemy to Venezuela, and we will see how that goes. Won't go very well, I don't think. And in a song, actually, created by the government to try and promote Maduro's calling of a constituent assembly very recently, one of the lines goes as follows: "The businessman gives me his hand, and I give him mine." Later in the song, when a list of groups in society whom the assembly is designed to benefit is read out, among the groups called out are empresarios, businessmen. A worse understanding of class structures could not be possible. Capitalist sabotage. As has been seen, Venezuela's economy is still largely privately owned. Venezuelan businessmen are refusing to produce because it's a strike of capital. They don't see any opportunity for profit, therefore they will not produce. The only way that production will get moving again is if the government stops beating around the bush and actually hands over these businesses to democratic workers' control. Not just piecemeal expropriations here and there of individual businesses, but a wholesale expropriation of the capitalists. Venezuela's largest company, actually, Empresas Polar, imports most of Venezuela's food. Its CEO, Lorenzo Mendoza, is openly opposed to Maduro, openly opposed to the government, openly encouraging the opposition. And yet, Maduro has not had the courage to expropriate his company. The US has placed sanctions on Venezuela, actually, as you all know, in a calculated bid to wreck the country, and has even threatened military action. Now, I can assure you all that this is not just an empty threat. Trump may be a buffoon, but the bourgeoisie in America and across the world are not going to sit back and allow Venezuela to simply ignore its obligations to the capitalists. They are going to do everything in their power to make sure Venezuela pays its debt. They will do everything in their power to try and subjugate the country. The peaceful opposition, so-called peaceful opposition, for a lot of our mainstream media, are they really just so peaceful? No, they aren't. The mainstream opposition, they have spent months using violence against the government. Chavistas, black Chavistas especially, have been lynched in the streets by the opposition. Most deaths, according to a study done by Venezuela Analysis, are the fault of the opposition. The opposition is concentrated, not throughout the country, on the urban middle class, within the cities, especially in the capital. And they've always hated Chavez, both for racial reasons and for class reasons. In no country would an opposition that incites violence, commits arson, and openly calls for the removal of the democratically elected ruling government be permitted to exist. And it's for this reason that the private TV stations that incite counter-revolution, and some of whom supported the 2002 coup against Chavez, have rightfully been taken off the air, much to the hallooing and applying of all these human rights organizations with their inevitable biases in the interests of capital. So, is Venezuela socialist? No, it is not socialist. The answer is resoundingly no. No country in which its economy is in the hands of private enterprise can be described as socialist. All of the achievements of Chavez were within the limits of capitalism. Now, before his death, Chavez did acknowledge that Venezuela needed to change, that these reforms within the context of capitalism, within the restrictions of capitalism, just weren't working. But he was one man, as I have said. It remains to the rest of his supporters, to the rest of his party, to actually take up this challenge, to actually break with bureaucracy, to break with Bonapartism, and it remains to be seen whether they will actually do this. Venezuela is still run by a bourgeois Bonapartist state, in which bureaucrats, army generals, and government officials are themselves capitalists, using the rhetoric of socialism whilst profiting from the country's misfortune. In fact, the army actually owns a lot of Venezuela's economy. They're not going to stand by and see their hard-won gains all frittered away and given to the workers, given to the masses. No, they are capitalists themselves. They want the crisis to continue. They are profiting from it, and as long as Maduro remains in their pocket, they will not act against the government. But the moment that Maduro actually tries to be radical, we will see them turning against him. We will see them betraying the revolution. This is why these so-called army officers who pledge their loyalty to socialism in words can't be trusted. What does counter-revolution mean? The restoration of the old order would be a disaster for Venezuela, for Latin America, and for the entire world. The defeat of the Bolivarian Revolution means the restoration of neoliberalism, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, all those horrible organizations coming back to the country with their tentacles upon the future of Venezuela's children. They will all return. They will all come back to the country and implement their punishing austerity measures onto the working class of Venezuela. And this would possibly mean the murder of thousands or even millions of working class activists, like we saw on the Caracas and the Paris, with a complete demoralization of the working class movement. Do we want this? Do we want these South American fascists like Pinochet and Videla coming back in Venezuela? Do we want Pinochet's helicopter tours in Venezuela? No, we don't. We don't want to see communists giving free helicopter rides under Venezuelan Pinochet. What we want is socialism. What is the response of true revolutionaries? Critical support for the Bolivarian Revolution. Chavez did many good things for the Venezuelan people, but he did not go far enough. And that's why we are seeing the disaster that is now ensuing. Who here has read the Bible? The Bible, very interesting book, full of great poetry, etc. I was a bit disappointed by the ending though. But you can read in that book, it says, one cannot serve both God and mammon. Similarly, no state can serve both capital and labor. It must fall on either the side of the capitalists or the side of the workers. And the state of Venezuela is vacillating between the two. It must side with the workers. It must destroy the bourgeois state and build a proletarian one. Now, a victory of the opposition would be a victory for the counter-revolution. We didn't do what the sectarians do and simply wash our hands of the whole crisis and say, oh, well, Venezuela didn't work out, we'll just give up on it. No, we must support our leftist friends in Venezuela, and we must do what Alan Woods did. Give critical support to the revolutionaries, who actually, the sectarians, in fact, left-wing sectarians, left-wing communists, those people with their infantile disorders, they criticize Alan Woods for supporting Chavez and his revolution. But what they don't understand is that we don't just be sectarians. Once we acknowledge that, yes, he was not perfect, yes, there are many problems with the Venezuelan government, a victory for the opposition will be a disaster. We have to give critical support to the regime, but we must move it to the left, and we must try and get it to be purged of its reactionary elements, so that it can move in a more consistently revolutionary direction. We must campaign against any and all foreign imperialist intervention in Venezuela. The way forward, Maduro must break off all dialogue of capitalists, both foreign and domestic. All the land, banks and corporations of Venezuela must be expropriated, and they must be run on a rational, democratic plan of production by the workers of Venezuela. Venezuela should refuse to pay any debt to the foreign capitalists whatsoever. The bourgeois army of the bourgeois state should be liquidated. It should be replaced with armed militias like the Bolivarian circles, albeit under independent working control. The bureaucracy should be dissolved, and it should be replaced, as Lenin said in the State of the Revolution, with elected officials, subject to recall, and should be paid no more than an average worker. The state should be purged of all corrupt officials and businessmen, who should be subject to arrest, trial, and judgment. The revolution should be encouraged to spread beyond its borders to encompass all of South America as Chavez dreamed. The theory of permanent revolution. What we see in Venezuela is a situation in which Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution applies very well. When he was a young man, not very young in that picture, but when he was a young man, he came up with this theory of permanent revolution. And in this theory, he basically says that in underdeveloped capitalist countries like Russia at that time, like Venezuela today, the bourgeoisie just can't play a progressive role. It cannot do its historical task. It cannot fulfill its historical mission of developing the productive forces in the society to its furthest extent. But it can't do this. It is tied to the foreign capitalists. It is tied also to pre-capitalist relations, like colonialism. It just cannot play a consistently revolutionary role because it is tied by 1,000 threads to the old aristocracy. And so it is the proletariat that must take up this mission. And they must go beyond the tasks of capitalism. They must build socialism, its permanent revolution, not two-stage theory as it was come up with the Mensheviks. It's permanent revolution, a straight path to socialism. That is what the government should adopt. That is what the government should implement in Venezuela. Lastly, I will invite you all to join the international Marxist tendency and to fight for socialism in Venezuela and elsewhere. Patria, socialismo o muerte. Y veremos y venceremos. Motherland, socialism or death, we will live and we will conquer. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. The people united will never be defeated. Chavez vive, la lucha sigue. Chavez lives, the fight continues. Viva Venezuela! Viva la Revolución Bolivariana! Long live Venezuela and long live the Bolivarian Revolution. And finally, eres un burro, Mr. Trump. You are a donkey, Mr. Trump.
We'll keep the pause going as he turns off the live stream.